They sing it before a football match. Most of them could not tell you who wrote it. Almost none of them know that the words were set down by a man who was coughing blood into a handkerchief 400 miles away in a Devon fishing village in the last autumn of his life. His name was Henry Francis Lyte. He was 54 years old, and he had 10 weeks to live. He was born on the 1st of June, 1793, at Edna near Kelso, in the Scottish borders. His father was Thomas Lyte, a captain in the army from an old Somerset family that had lost its money and its manor house. One biographer describes Thomas as a man more interested in fishing and shooting than in facing up to his family. And that's a polite way of saying what happened next. Thomas arranged for his two oldest sons to be enrolled at Portera Royal School in Enniskillen County, Fermanagh. Then he disappeared. Henry's mother, Anne-Marie, moved to London with the youngest boy. Both of them died there. So a 9-year-old was left at a boarding school in Ulster, with no father who would claim him and no mother left alive. The headmaster was a clergyman named Robert Burrows. He read the boy's work, saw what was there, and quietly paid his school fees himself. During the holidays when the other boys went home, Burrows brought Henry into his own family. One man's decision to absorb a cost that was not his kept Henry Lyte in school. Everything after depends on that. Lyte went to Trinity College, Dublin. He meant to become a doctor. He became a poet instead, and then in 1815 he became a priest, with very little training for it. His first post was near Wexford. By his own admission, he had almost no idea why he was there. Around 1816, a neighboring clergyman was dying, and Lyte was called to sit with him. And what happened in that room was not what either man expected. The dying priest told Lyte that they had both gotten it wrong, that they had read Paul's letters their whole professional lives and had never taken them in their plain and literal sense. So the two of them opened the scriptures together, a dying man and a young pastor, and went looking. Lyte wrote afterward that the man died happy, believing that though he had deeply erred, there was one whose death and suffering could answer for all of it. And then Lyte added 6 words about himself. I was greatly affected by the whole matter. He started studying his Bible and he started preaching differently. He had spent years quietly laughing at 4 or 5 local clergymen he considered to be just enthusiastic. And now he began preaching the way they did. Remember the room. Remember that a deathbed is where this man's faith actually began. It's going to matter at the end. In 1817, he married Anne Maxwell. She was 31, 7 years older than he was, and a committed Methodist who never converted to his Anglicanism. On Sunday morning in Brixham, he would drive his wife to the Methodist meeting, then continue on to his own church to preach. In the evening, she came to his. Nearly 2 centuries before the word existed, the Lytes had an ecumenical marriage, and it worked. At Sway in Hampshire, they lost a daughter. She was 1 month old. Her name was Anna Marie, after her mother. In April of 1824, Lyte took the parish at Lower Brixham, a Devon fishing village. He stayed 23 years. Within weeks, he had joined the school's committee. Within 2 months, he was the chairman of it. He founded the first Sunday school in the Torbay area, and then a second one specifically for sailors, because for men who worked the boats there was no other schooling available. Every year, he organized a treat for the children, close to 1,000 of them, with a short service and then tea and games in the field. He put a Bible on every vessel in the harbor. He compiled a manual of devotions for men to use at sea and songs to go with it. He visited the fishermen in their houses cut into the rock of the cliff, and he visited them on board. He lived at Berry Head House, a converted military hospital on the headland, and he filled it with books, theology, and Old English poetry. His obituary called it one of the most extensive and valuable libraries in the west of England. When it was sold after his death, the auction catalog ran to 296 pages. He spoke Latin, Greek, and French. He carried a flute everywhere he went. He got up at 6 in the morning and prayed for 2 hours before he ate anything. His lungs had been failing him his whole life. Asthma, bronchitis, eventually tuberculosis. He spent winters in France and Italy trying to outrun the damp. The treatments he described in his own letters, they read like an indictment of Victorian medicine. Blistering, bleeding, large doses of prussic acid, which is another name for cyanide. And in 1835, he applied to become vicar of Crediton. He was turned down, though, because he was too sick to be trusted with it. In 1839, at 46, he wrote a poem called Declining Days, and in it he asked for one thing. He wanted to leave behind some sparklet of the soul that might still be alive after he was clay. Then came 1846, and this is the part the inspirational retellings tend to leave out. Lyte had started leaning toward the Oxford movement and expressing high church sympathies, and his congregation revolted. People left. Dissenting chapels took them in, mostly the Plymouth Brethren. Nearly his entire choir walked out. 12 young men he had personally trained to hold services in the surrounding villages left too. All of them. And when his own daughter married his senior curate, Lyte did not perform the ceremony. One of the choir members who left said afterward that he knew exactly which line of the hymn was about him. It's the one that runs, "When other helpers fail and comforts flee." That line was not written about death in an abstraction. It was written by a pastor whose people had left him in the last year he had. He spent the summer of 1847 at Berryhead, and everyone understood he was dying. He had already written out instructions for how his family's money should be handled after he was gone. On a Sunday, in early September, he announced that he intended to preach. His family tried to stop him. He went anyway. He climbed into the pulpit at Lower Brixham and preached on the Lord's Supper, and then he administered communion to the people who were left. In that sermon, he called Christ's sacrifice a pillow of consolation for a dying soul. And then he said to the congregation, "O brethren, I can speak feelingly, experimentally on this latter point, and I stand up here among you seasonably today as alive from the dead." He was telling them he was already gone and speaking to them anyway. The traditional account says he rested that afternoon, then walked down through the garden to the rocks and sat looking west. The sun went down over Dartmoor. The harbor below him went the color of molten gold, and the trawlers sat still at anchor. When the light was gone, he walked back up to his study, and that evening he put a manuscript into the hands of a relative. It was called Abide With Me. Now, here's where a documentary needs to tell you the truth. That version comes from the memorial volume his family published in 1850. His most careful modern biographer, B.G. Skinner, devotes an entire chapter to the question and concludes the hymn was more likely written in July or August, weeks before the sermon, not in a single golden evening after it. The sunset may just be a beautiful arrangement and stretching of true things. But the dying, that's not in question. The last sermon, that's not in question. A man who knew he was finished wrote a prayer asking God to stay, and then he left England for the last time. He was traveling towards Rome, and on the coast, he could go no further. He died there on the 20th of November, 1847, in his 54th year. He is buried in the English cemetery in that city, a long way from Edinburgh and a long way from Brixham. A clergyman was with him at the end. The last words Henry Lyte said out loud were two: peace, joy. Now back to the hymn. Lyte wrote his own tune for it. His biographer called it dull. Nobody sings it. And the hymn sat mostly unnoticed for 14 years. Then in 1861, the editors of Hymns, Ancient and Modern, were assembling the first edition, and William Henry Monk, their music editor, realized that hymn number 27 had no melody attached to it. And there are two accounts of what happened next, and they do not agree. In the first, told by a friend who heard it from Monk himself, he simply sat down at a piano with someone else's lesson going on in the same room and wrote the tune in 10 minutes. In the second telling, given decades later by his widow Annie, he wrote it during a time of great sorrow while the two of them stood watching the sun go down. He called it Eventide. It's the melody in your head probably right now. In October of 1950, the night before a German firing squad executed the British nurse, Edith Cavell, in Brussels, this hymn was on her lips. It was a favorite of King George V, and it was sung at his funeral. And at the 1927 FA Cup final, the association secretary swapped it in to replace Alexander's Ragtime Band in the pre-match program. When the crowd started singing, King George V stood up and took off his hat. The tradition is held for nearly a century. Rugby League picked it up 2 years later. It became Gandhi's favorite hymn, and Indian military bands played it every January at the close of Republic Days for decades. And that school, Portera Royal, that took in an abandoned 9-year-old and paid his fees when his father would not, they still sing it. They sing it as their victory song. They sing it at their service of remembrance. Henry Lyte asked for one thing in 1839, some sparklet of the soul that might still be alive after he was gone. He is buried in a cemetery that almost nobody visits. His library was auctioned off, his choir left him, and yet every spring, 90,000 strangers in a football stadium ask God to stay with them in his words and do not know his name. Ask for something small enough, and God may hand you back something you never asked for at all.